Hey guys, welcome back to more Malicious Compliance HOA stories. In this Ripestories video, my HOA president banned me from plowing snow for free because she thought I was running some kind of commercial scam. The best part, nobody in the neighborhood knew about it until we got buried under 2 feet of snow and could not get out of our own street. What follows is a masterclass in malicious compliance. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one is a malicious compliance story that is titled, "Don't want us to clear the roof anymore? Okay, fine, you will regret it." So I work for a company that clears snow from rooftops during the winter. It's very hard work and sometimes very oddly satisfying. It snowed a lot this year, and the last time it snowed this much was close to 20 years ago, so there's a lot of work going around. Anyway, earlier this week we were clearing up a network of rooftops at a large spa/resort. One of these buildings was an ice arena. There is over a meter, 3 feet of snow on this particular roof, and it is heavy. It is a large building, and even with a crew of 10 people, it would take several days to clear it up. On the beginning of second day, the GM of the spa decided it is too expensive to hire a crew anymore and decided to let us go that day. My boss explained through him that it's not wise to let us go as the weather is warming up and snow tends to get extremely heavy if it rains, but the GM did not want to hear it. But then we packed up our equipment and left that day. A few days later, on Thursday, the weather warmed up and the snow started to melt rapidly. On Friday, it started raining and my boss got a panic call from the GM because the roof of the ice arena partially collapsed under the weight of the snow and needed a crew to continue to lighten the load. Sorry, but cannot go on a building that is unstable. You are going to have to rebuild the roof. And yeah, guys, that is why you should always treat the guys or girls that are responsible for snow removal with kindness. Maybe that business owner learned his lesson. Either way, if you enjoy malicious compliance stories, please don't forget to like the video and maybe even post a comment telling me where you are watching from today. It is very much appreciated. The next one is titled, "HOA Karen bans me from her neighborhood and demands that I stop snow removal." Posted on r/maliciouscompliance. So I own a small landscaping and snow removal business in upstate New York, and I live in what I thought was a pretty normal neighborhood. My property sits at the end of a private road that connects to what everyone calls the HOA streets, even though they are technically public roads that just happen to run through an HOA community. The whole setup is kinda weird, but it works, or, well, at least it did until this Karen showed up. For context, my house and shop are on about 3 acres at the very back of this development. When the neighborhood was built in the 90s, the developer sold my lot separately because it was bigger and zoned for home business use. I bought it 6 years ago specifically because I could run my equipment and store my trucks without anyone complaining. The catch is that to get to my property, I have to drive through about half a mile of my neighborhood streets. I've got a legal easement and right-of-way in my deed, which basically means I can access my property no matter what. This becomes important later. I've got a nice setup. I run a 2-truck operation doing commercial snow removal for office parks, shopping centers, that kind of thing. During winter I'm out from 3 AM until sometimes noon, just clearing parking lots. It's good money, but it's brutal work. I also own an older Chevy 2500 with a straight blade that I use for my own long driveway and the private road leading to my property. Here is where the neighborly part comes in. For some context, for the past 6 winters after I finished my driveway and private road, I've been casually plowing the main streets in the HOA neighborhood on my way out to work. It takes me maybe an extra 30 minutes total and costs me basically nothing since I'm already out there with the truck warmed up and the snowplow on. The neighborhood has maybe 40 houses total and the street layout is pretty simple, just a main loop road and 3 small side streets. It is easy work and the residents love it. I would get smiles from people scraping their windshields as I drove by. I would find thank you notes in my mailbox, cookies on my porch around the holidays, that kind of thing. It was just a nice community thing, you know. I've never asked for anything and they never offered to pay me. It was just me being a decent neighbor. And by the way, guys, just a little quiz here for you. Do you think good deeds like the ones OP is doing go unpunished in HOA neighborhoods? Let me know what you think in the comments. Important detail, I'm not part of the HOA and my property was never included in the HOA boundaries when they formed. I can access the streets because they are public roads and I have that easement, but I don't pay HOA dues and I'm not subject to their rules. This has never been an issue because I keep my property clean, my trucks are parked behind my shop building where nobody can see them from the street, and I generally mind my own business. Well, about 15 months ago, this woman and her husband moved into one of the bigger houses near the entrance of the neighborhood. I'm not gonna use real names here, but everyone called her Karen behind her back, so that's what I'll use here. Karen was maybe 50, drove a white SUV, and had that specific haircut. You know the one. She had opinions about everything and she made sure that everyone knew them. Within 2 months of moving in, Karen got herself elected HOA president. The previous president was a nice older guy who barely did anything, and I think people voted for Karen because she seemed organized and motivated at the meetings. Big mistake though. She immediately started sending out violation notices for stupid stuff. Someone's mailbox was the wrong shade of black, someone else had their trash cans visible from the street for 20 minutes too long on trash day. She created a 9-page document about what kind of holiday decorations were acceptable. In short, it was insane. I stayed out of it because, again, I am not in the HOA and my interactions with Karen was basically just waving when I drove past her house on my way to work. I mean, she never waved back, but whatever, not everyone is a morning person. Then last October, things changed. I got a letter in my mailbox from the HOA, not mailed, just stuffed in there. The letter said that the HOA had reviewed its financial obligations and determined that all residents who utilize HOA-maintained streets would need to pay a new annual street maintenance fee of $500. The letter said that this fee was due by November 1st and that failure to pay would result in restricted access to HOA amenities. I read this thing 3 times trying to figure out what she was talking about. HOA-maintained streets? The streets are maintained by the township. They plow them, patch them, the whole deal. The HOA does not maintain anything except a little entrance sign and some flowers around it. And what amenities? There's no pool, no clubhouse, nothing. I called the number on the letter and Karen answered. I stayed polite and explained that I'm not part of the HOA and I don't think the fee applies to me. She cut me off and said that anyone who uses the streets needs to contribute to their upkeep. Well, I pointed out that the township maintains the streets and that I have a legal easement to access my property, and she said that was irrelevant and that the HOA board had voted and the decision was final. I told her I would not be paying because I'm not an HOA member and I don't use any services they provide. She got quiet for a second and then said, "We'll see about that," and hung up. I figured that was the end of it. I was not worried because I know my property rights. My lawyer looked over everything when I bought the place and the easement is rock solid. The streets are public roads and she cannot just ban me from driving on them. Well, 2 weeks later, I got another letter. This one was more formal. It said that because I had refused to contribute to street maintenance despite regular use of HOA snow removal services, the HOA was formally prohibiting me and my commercial vehicles from operating on HOA streets. It said that I was banned from performing any snow removal operations on HOA property and that if I was found plowing HOA streets, I would be fined $100 per occurrence. I had to read that twice. She thought I was charging for plowing or that the HOA was paying for it? I called her back and this time I was less polite. I explained that I'd been plowing the streets for free, as a courtesy, for 6 years already. I told her I've never charged anyone or been paid by the HOA for anything. I said I was doing it because I'm a nice neighbor and it takes me 30 minutes. She actually laughed at me and she said, "Nice try, you're running a commercial operation and using our streets as your personal client base. The board has reviewed your business and we've determined this is unauthorized commercial activity." I was so confused. Client base? I'm plowing for free, nobody is paying me. She said, "Then you won't mind stopping, huh? Effective immediately, you are prohibited from operating your snowplow on HOA streets. If you need to access your property, you may drive your personal vehicle only. No commercial trucks, no plows, no equipment. This is your final warning." I asked what I was supposed to do when it snowed, and she said that the HOA would contract with a professional service and residents would no longer need to rely on unauthorized volunteers. I asked if she had lined up this service yet, and she said that was HOA business and none of my concern. I sat there for a minute just processing this. Famous last words, by the way, guys. Then I said, "Just to be clear, you're ordering me not to plow the neighborhood streets anymore, right?" She said, "That's correct, you're banned from snow removal operations on HOA property. Do not make me issue a formal cease and desist." I said, "Okay," and hung up. Well, here's the thing, guys. I was annoyed, but also kind of relieved. Plowing the neighborhood was nice, but it was also unpaid labor that I'd been doing out of goodwill. If she wanted to ban me from doing free work, fine, I had plenty of paying customers to worry about already. I sent her an email that same day, very professional. I wrote, per our phone conversation today, I acknowledge your directive that I cease all snow removal operations on HOA streets, effective immediately. I will comply with this request and will restrict my plowing to my private property boundaries only. Also, thank you for clarifying the HOA's position. I CC'd the email to my attorney just to have a paper trail. He replied telling me to document everything and to take photos if things got weird. I also sent a quick text to a few of the neighbors I was friendly with, letting them know that the HOA had asked me to stop plowing the neighborhood. Most of them were confused and said that they would talk to Karen. Well, November came and went without any snow, the weather stayed weirdly warm, and Karen sent out an email to all residents in mid-November saying the HOA had secured a contract with a professional snow removal service and that the streets would be properly maintained this season. She didn't name the company and nobody seemed to know who it was, but whatever. Not my problem, right? Well, the first real snow came on December 3rd. It was a Tuesday morning and we got hit with about 14 inches overnight. I woke up at 2:30 a.m. like always, checked the radar and headed out to start my commercial route. I plowed my long driveway and my private road like normal, and when I got to where my property ends and the HOA streets begin, I stopped. My plow was up, the blade sitting high above the snow, the neighborhood streets were completely buried. I drove through slowly in my personal truck, regular tires, no plow. It was rough going, the snow was deep and heavy. I passed about 6 houses where people were already outside with shovels trying to clear paths to their driveways. A couple people waved at me. One guy yelled something, but I couldn't hear him through my closed windows. I spent the morning clearing my commercial accounts like normal, and when I got home around noon, I had 7 missed calls and about 15 text messages. 3 texts were from neighbors asking if I'd forgotten to plow snow. 4 were asking if my truck was broken, and the rest were asking what was going on. I replied to a few of them explaining that the HOA president had formally banned me from plowing the streets. I sent screenshots of Karen's letter and my email response. The reactions were immediate. People were confused and angry, and apparently nobody knew about this ban except Karen and maybe 1 or 2 board members who never came to meetings. One neighbor, this guy Tim who lives 4 houses down from the entrance, called me directly. He was pissed. He said he had been trying to get out for work all morning and couldn't get his car up the street. He had called Karen and she told him the plow service was en route, but nobody had shown up. He asked if I could just plow anyway, and I told him I wanted to help but I couldn't risk the fines. He said he understood and that he was gonna handle this. By that evening, the neighborhood Facebook group was on fire. I'm not in it, but Tim was sending me screenshots. People were demanding to know why the streets were not plowed. Someone posted a photo of my pristine driveway next to the buried neighborhood street with a caption asking what was going on. Karen finally posted saying that the contracted service had been delayed due to high demand but would be there first thing tomorrow. Tomorrow came, but no plow. The snow from the first storm settled and then we got another 6 inches Wednesday night. Now the streets had close to 20 inches of packed snow and ice and people were stuck. I watched from my property as neighbors tried to dig out. Some people were carpooling, parking at the neighborhood entrance and walking through the snow to get to their cars. In short, it was chaos. I went out Thursday morning for my commercial route, same deal. I plowed my property and stopped at the boundary. My driveway looked like a completely different world compared to the neighborhood. I felt bad, but I also wasn't about to pay $100 fines for helping. Thursday afternoon I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was an elderly woman named Margaret who lives on one of the side streets. She was almost crying. She said she had a doctor's appointment that morning and couldn't even get out. Her daughter had to cancel work to come pick her up, but her daughter's car got stuck trying to turn onto Margaret's street. She asked if there was any way I could just plow her street really quick. I felt terrible. I told her that I couldn't because of the HOA ban, but that she could call Karen and complain. She said she had called Karen 3 times and kept getting sent to voicemail, and she said other neighbors were having the same issue. That evening there was an emergency post in the Facebook group. Someone had filed a complaint with the township saying the streets were a safety hazard, and the township apparently called the HOA asking about their snow removal plan. Karen posted saying that the situation was under control and that she was working with contractors to resolve the delays. Well, Friday, it snowed again. Another 8 inches. The neighborhood was completely impassable except for the people with trucks or SUVs who could kind of bash their way through. The main loop road looked like a sledding hill, and I saw someone's Honda Accord stuck at an angle halfway up the street near Tim's house, just abandoned there. Well, by Friday afternoon, people in the neighborhood were getting desperate. Someone posted that they had called 3 different plow companies, and the cheapest quote was $1,200 for an emergency service. The HOA only had about $8,000 in their yearly budget, and most of it had already been spent on Karen's landscaping projects for the entrance sign. There was no way they could afford multiple emergency plows. Saturday morning, I woke up to find about 30 people standing at the entrance to the neighborhood with handmade signs. I'm not even joking, actual protest signs. One said, "Where's our plow?" Another said, "HOA failed us." Someone had made a sign with Karen's face poorly photoshopped onto a picture of the Snow Queen from Frozen. It was petty, but also kind of funny. I later found out that Tim had organized it. He had been spreading the word about what Karen did, showing people the letter she sent me, explaining that I'd been plowing for free for years, and she banned me because she thought I was running some kind of scam. And people were furious. Karen drove by the protest around 10 AM and apparently stopped to yell at people. Someone recorded it on their phone and it ended up on the Facebook group. She was screaming about how this was harassment and how she was doing her best and how ungrateful everyone was. Someone yelled back asking where the contracted plow service was, and she said they were dealing with equipment issues and then drove off. That afternoon, the township got involved again. A code enforcement officer showed up and walked the streets taking photos. He apparently told several residents that the HOA needed to clear the streets within 48 hours or else the township would do it themselves and build a HOA. The cost would be around $3,000. Sunday was when things finally broke. Someone on the HOA board, not Karen, sent out an email calling for an emergency meeting that evening. The email said that due to recent concerns about snow removal and other matters, the board felt it was important to hear from residents. The meeting was scheduled for 6 PM at the community center building that the township let them use for free. Normally, these meetings get maybe 8 or 10 people, but that night, over 60 people showed up. The room was packed and people were standing in the back. I heard later that someone had to open the side doors because it was getting too hot from all the bodies. I didn't go to the meeting because I'm not an HOA member, but Tim called me afterwards and filled me in on everything. He said it was the most dramatic thing he had ever seen. Karen basically opened the meeting trying to maintain control, and she had a whole speech prepared about unprecedented weather challenges and vendor reliability issues. She tried to explain that the contracted snow removal company had experienced mechanical failures and that she was actively seeking alternative providers. Someone interrupted and asked for the name of the company, but Karen said it was confidential vendor information. Someone else said that sounded like there was no company at all. Karen insisted there was, but then Tim stood up and dropped the bomb. He had done some research. He pulled up the documents from October when Karen was supposedly gotten approval for this ban on my plowing. The minutes showed that the only 3 board members who were present were Karen, her friend Linda, who was a secretary, and one other person who lived out of state and then called in. There was no quorum, which according to the bylaws meant they couldn't vote on anything binding. The ban was completely invalid, and then he dropped the second bomb. He had gotten quotes from 3 different snow removal companies for the whole season, professional seasonal contracts ranging from $3,500 to $5,000 for unlimited plowing. Even emergency one-time service was at least $1,000 per visit, and none of these companies had any record of being contacted by the HOA. Karen tried to talk over him, but people were shouting questions. Where did the money go? Why was there no contract? Why did she ban the free plowing? Someone else stood up and said they'd been going through the HOA finances, and Karen had spent $4,200 from the yearly budget on new landscaping around the entrance sign, including decorative rocks that cost $900. She had also approved paying her friend Linda $300 a month for so-called administrative services, which nobody had ever voted on. It got ugly. People were yelling, Karen was yelling back, and she kept saying she had authority as president to make executive decisions. Someone pointed out that the bylaws explicitly stated that expenditures over $500 required a full board vote. Then Margaret, the elderly woman who had called me about her doctor appointment, stood up. She is apparently a pretty respected longtime resident, and she said very calmly that she had personally witnessed 6 years of me plowing the streets for free, and that I had never asked for anything in return, and that Karen had fabricated a conflict where none really existed. She said Karen's actions had directly put residents at risk, including herself. Then the room got quiet. Then someone made a motion to hold an immediate vote of no confidence for the entire board. Someone else seconded it, and Karen tried to argue that you cannot do that without proper notice, but the bylaws actually allow for emergency votes if more than 50% of residents are present, and they had just over 60% in the room, and then they voted. It was pretty much unanimous except for Linda and 2 other people. Karen, Linda, and the other board members were removed effective immediately, and they held a quick election for an interim board right there. Tim got voted in as temporary president along with 3 other people, and their first official act was to pass a motion apologizing to me for the harassment and formally rescinding the ban. Tim called me at about 9 p.m. He explained everything to me that happened and asked if I'd be willing to plow the streets one more time to get everyone unstuck. He said they could not pay me because the budget was tapped out, but he would make sure that everyone knew I was doing them a favor. I told him I'd do it, but I wanted something in writing first. I'm not getting burned twice. He then sent me an official email signed by the new board members stating that I was authorized to plow the streets and that I was doing so voluntarily without compensation, and that the HOA acknowledged no claims or liability against me. Good enough, I guess. I went out that night around 10 p.m. with my plow truck, and I spent about 4 hours clearing the whole neighborhood. It was a mess. The snow had been sitting for almost 5 days and was packed down hard in some spots. I had to make multiple passes on every street, and when I was done, the streets were clear, curb to curb, for the first time since the storm started. Sunday morning I woke up to find my porch covered in thank you notes, gift cards, and baked goods. Someone even left a case of beer. Someone else left a $50 Home Depot card. Margaret came by personally with a card and a homemade pie, and she said I was a godsend and that she hoped I would not hold the mess against the neighborhood. I told her I wouldn't. It was not the neighborhood's fault that Karen was on a power trip. The aftermath was kind of wild though. Karen tried to fight the vote, claiming it was invalid because of improper procedure, but the bylaws were pretty clear and she did not have a leg to stand on. She and her husband actually put their house up for sale in February and moved out by April. I heard through Tim that she was talking about suing the HOA, but nothing ever came of it. Linda also resigned from the board and basically stopped coming to any community events. The 3rd board member who got removed, the one who lived out of state, apparently didn't even care. He had only bought the house as an investment property and barely knew what was happening. The new board ended up being really solid, and Tim served as president for about 6 months until they could hold proper elections. During this time, they passed new rules requiring financial transparency, multiple quotes for any services, and mandatory resident input for major decisions. They also formally documented my right to access the streets and added a note in the meeting minutes thanking me for my years of service. I kept plowing the streets that winter, and the following winter, still free, still just being neighborly. The difference now is that the HOA board occasionally votes to give me a small gift card or something as a thank you, and they make sure everyone knows it is voluntary on my part. Anyway, that's my malicious compliance story. Thanks for reading, and if any HOA presidents are reading this, be cool to your neighbors. You never know when you might need them to dig you out of a hole, sometimes literally. And before we end the video, let's read another satisfying malicious compliance story. This one is titled, "Parked for 30 minutes longer than I paid for." So I went to a downtown restaurant last year, and as in many downtown areas, street parking is hard to find. I ended up parking in a lot and paid for 2 hours. I cannot quite remember how much it was, but I'm gonna guess it was about $30. I ended up overstaying my allotted time by 30 minutes. No big deal, I thought. Well, about a week later, I get a bill from the company that owns the lot. They wanted to charge me $80 for the 30 minutes. I then tried calling to dispute the charge, and while they did give me $20 off, I was still on the hook for $60 for a half an hour of parking. So I went to my bank account and scheduled 30 monthly payments of $2, figuring that if they're gonna charge me, I would create the hassle of them having to process a $2 check every month. I guess they decided that it was not worth it because today, after only 10 payments, I got the 11th check back in the mail with a note that my account has been paid in full. They wrote off $40 just to not have to process my $2 checks anymore. And yeah, Ripe Stars, thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you again tomorrow.